In the summer of 2022, a man named Cory Lloyd was sitting inside a glass-walled office in Stuart, Florida, air conditioning running, a view of the Intracoastal, $180 million already moving through his bank accounts. He had not stolen that money from a bank. He had not hacked a corporation. He had not run a Ponzi scheme or cooked books or moved product across a border. He had found something simpler, something hiding in plain sight inside the Affordable Care Act, something that required nothing more than a folding table, a list of names, and a network of people willing to walk into homeless shelters and mental health facilities and hand out cash. In 24 months, Cory Lloyd and his partner Stephen Strong enrolled tens of thousands of Americans into health insurance plans those people never knew existed, never used, and never wanted. The federal government paid $180 million in subsidies for every one of those plans. When the FBI finally closed in, Lloyd and Strong were worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, and the men and women whose names they had used to do it were left holding applications they never signed, for plans they never received, wondering why the government thought they had health insurance. This is a story of how two businessmen turned America's safety net into a $233 million personal income stream. What they did to the most vulnerable people in the country to pull it off, and how long it took before anyone noticed. The Affordable Care Act created a system of subsidies designed to do one thing: make health insurance affordable for people who could not otherwise pay for it. If your income fell below a certain threshold, the federal government would cover part or all of your monthly premium. The system ran on the honor system. You submitted your income. The government took your word for it. If you qualified, they paid the insurance company directly. The enrollee never saw the money. The insurance company collected the subsidy. The government wrote the check. It was clean, automated, and designed to process millions of applications quickly. It was also, under the right circumstances, a machine that could be pointed at anyone. Cory Lloyd understood this. He was 47 years old, president of an insurance brokerage firm called AP of South Florida. He had spent years in the insurance business. He understood how commissions worked, how subsidies moved, how applications were processed. He knew exactly which levers to pull. Stephen Strong was 43, CEO of a marketing company in Mansfield, Texas. He had the infrastructure, the call centers, the sales staff, the systems for processing leads at scale. Lloyd had the insurance licenses. Strong had the marketing machine. Together, they had everything they needed to run a national enrollment operation. What they chose to enroll, however, was not who the program was designed for. The scheme required one thing the traditional insurance business did not: physical access to people who had no income to report. Because if your income was low enough, ACA subsidies covered 100% of your premium. The federal government paid the entire bill. The insurance company collected full payment. Lloyd and Strong collected the commission, and the person whose name was on the application owed nothing because there was nothing to owe. The problem was finding enough of these people and then getting them to sign applications, especially people who were suspicious of strangers offering things for free, especially people who had been let down by systems their entire lives. Lloyd and Strong solved this problem with cash. They recruited what the court documents called street marketers, people paid to work homeless encampments, unemployment lines, mental health facilities, and substance abuse programs. The street marketer's job was simple: find people willing to give their name and personal information to an insurance enrollment form. In exchange, they got cash, sometimes gift cards. The people being enrolled, in many cases, did not fully understand what they were agreeing to. Some signed without being told it was a health insurance application at all. Some were told it was free and thought it would benefit them. Most never saw the insurance card. Most never saw the plan documents. Most never knew their identity had been used to generate a government subsidy check. What they got was a bribe, ranging from a few dollars to enough to matter when you had nothing. What Lloyd and Strong got was a head count. Every name on an application was worth money. The more names, the more subsidies. The more subsidies, the more commissions. By the time the operation reached its peak, Lloyd and Strong were not running an insurance brokerage. They were running an industrial pipeline with human beings at one end and federal subsidy checks at the other. The numbers are almost impossible to process. Between 2021 and 2023, Lloyd and Strong's operation enrolled tens of thousands of people into ACA plans for which the federal government paid out at least $180 million in fraudulent subsidies. $180 million, not billed, paid. The government actually wrote those checks, actually transferred those funds, actually processed those applications through the system as legitimate because the system was designed to move fast. The ACA enrollment portal was built for volume, built to process thousands of applications daily, built to get coverage to people who needed it without bureaucratic delays. Lloyd and Strong exploited every millisecond of that speed. Each application was fraudulent in one of two ways. Either the enrollee had income that actually disqualified them, or the enrollee had given their name without understanding they were being enrolled at all. In both cases, the subsidy was illegal. In both cases, the government paid. Lloyd and Strong moved money through layers designed to obscure the trail. Commissions from insurance companies flowed into the brokerage. The brokerage paid the marketing company. The marketing company paid the street marketers. Everyone got a cut. The government kept writing checks, and the people at the bottom of the chain, the people whose names made it all possible, got a few dollars and an insurance plan they never used. The word victim in this case requires unpacking, because the obvious victims, the federal government, the taxpayers who funded the ACA program, were enormous and abstract. But there were human victims too, people whose names Lloyd and Strong used as raw material. When you are enrolled in an ACA plan without your knowledge, several things happen. You lose eligibility for Medicaid because the system sees you as already insured. You cannot enroll in a plan you actually want because the system shows you as already enrolled. And if you try to access actual health care, you may find yourself tangled in a plan you never chose, administered by a company you never contacted, with a deductible you cannot pay. Federal prosecutors describe these victims in court filings as people experiencing homelessness, unemployment, and mental health and substance abuse disorders, people already carrying the heaviest loads, people the ACA was explicitly designed to protect. Used as inventory, one component of the scheme involved what prosecutors described as street marketers sometimes offering bribes to induce vulnerable individuals to enroll. The bribe was the payment. The enrollment was the product. The product was sold to the federal government for $180 million. The investigation that eventually reached Lloyd and Strong did not begin with a tip. It began with a number, an anomaly in enrollment data that federal analysts at the Department of Health and Human Services flagged during routine pattern analysis. The pattern was this: specific zip codes in Florida and Texas showing enrollment volumes that did not match the actual population of subsidy-eligible residents. The numbers were too high, the growth was too fast, and the income data on the applications was clustering in ways that suggested coordination rather than organic enrollment. The FBI's Miami field office opened the investigation in coordination with the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, 3 agencies, 1 target, find out who was controlling the enrollment machine. Following the money required unraveling multiple layers of shell entities and commission structures. The insurance companies paid commissions to Lloyd's brokerage. The brokerage paid Strong's marketing company. The marketing company paid subagents and street-level recruiters. At every layer, the payments were papered as legitimate business transactions. None of it looked like fraud from a single angle. You had to map the entire architecture before the shape of the scheme became visible. It took years. Agents tracked wire transfers across dozens of accounts. They interviewed street marketers who described being paid to work homeless encampments. They pulled applications and cross-referenced the names against people who denied ever signing anything. They built a case from the bottom up, transaction by transaction, signature by signature. When the indictments came, they were precise. Lloyd and Strong were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The government had the wire transfers. The government had the applications. The government had the witnesses. The case was built. The trial began in the fall of 2025 in the Southern District of Florida. Lloyd and Strong both entered not guilty pleas. Their defense, broadly, that the enrollment operation was legal, that the ACA system itself allowed for the commissions they collected, and that any irregularities in the applications were the responsibility of the street-level enrollers, not the executives at the top. The prosecution's response was systematic. Prosecutors walked the jury through the enrollment data, the commission structures, the communications between Lloyd and Strong, and the testimony of street marketers who described receiving direct instructions from people connected to the brokerage. A third co-defendant, Dafoud Isa, had already pleaded guilty to major fraud against the United States before trial began. His cooperation provided the prosecution with an inside account of how the scheme operated. The picture that emerged was not of rogue street marketers operating without direction. It was of a managed operation with corporate structure, incentive systems, and executives who knew exactly what was being sold and to whom. In November 2025, the jury found both Lloyd and Strong guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Strong was additionally convicted on 2 counts of money laundering. The verdict was unanimous, every count, both defendants. The sentencing hearing took place in February 2026. Attorney General Pamela Bondi addressed the case directly in a public statement, preying upon medically compromised consumers to rob hundreds of millions from taxpayer-funded programs is evil and unforgivable. FBI Director Kash Patel added, "These defendants did not just commit fraud, they built a business model around exploiting people at their most vulnerable." Cory Lloyd, 20 years in federal prison. Stephen Strong, 20 years in federal prison, both ordered to pay $180.6 million in restitution. Dafoud Isa, who cooperated, 35 months. AP of South Florida, Lloyd's brokerage company, separately pleaded guilty to major fraud against the United States. The company was ordered to pay $27.6 million in restitution. Assured Partners, its parent company at the time, agreed to pay $107 million in a parallel civil resolution for violations of the False Claims Act. The total financial exposure across the criminal and civil cases exceeded $300 million. Every dollar traceable back to applications filed in the names of people who needed help and were used instead as raw material. The people whose names were used did not receive restitution checks. They received something harder to quantify, a gap in their eligibility, a record of coverage they did not choose, and in some cases, a barrier between them and the actual health care they needed. The program was designed to reach them. It was used against them instead. The ACA system still operates the same way. The subsidy structure that Lloyd and Strong exploited is still in place. The speed of automated enrollment processing is still a feature, not a bug. Fraud prevention improvements have been made since the investigation, but the fundamental architecture, rapid enrollment, income self-reporting, federal subsidy payment, remains. Federal prosecutors have made clear that ACA enrollment fraud remains an active enforcement priority. The Southern District of Florida, where Lloyd and Strong were tried, has prosecuted multiple enrollment fraud cases. The pattern is consistent. Insurance brokers with access to enrollment systems, marketing companies with street-level reach, and vulnerable populations used as the raw material for subsidy generation. Lloyd and Strong will serve their time. The $180 million they generated is largely unrecoverable, moved through too many accounts, spent, dissipated. The restitution order exists on paper. Whether the money follows is a different question. What does not dissipate is the record. Every application, every commission payment, every wire transfer, every name on every enrollment form that traces back to a homeless shelter, a mental health waiting room, an unemployment line. The architecture of the scheme is preserved in the court record, available to anyone who wants to understand exactly how a $233 million operation was built on the names of people who had nothing. Cory Lloyd is 47 years old. He will be 67 when he is released. Stephen Strong is 43. He will be 63. The math on those numbers is clear. What is also clear is the math on the other side. Tens of thousands of applications, $180 million in government funds, and a network of human beings, the most vulnerable Americans in the country, whose names were the only thing standing between two men and a fortune. They were worth more as paperwork than they were as people. Lloyd and Strong made sure of it.